All right, I decided to go ahead and shoot the video before I got back to my house. I thought I had this great shirt on that I'm wearing today, and I know Luke would want to take a look at this great shirt while the video was being made. So I thought I'd just stay here and make the video. So this is for chapter 16 of the Stearns book. And this is in case it's going to snow tonight, which it's looking like it's most likely going to happen. So here's all the notes you need for chapter 16. In 1200, most of the Europeans were peasants. Men and women both worked in the fields, so there was some equality amongst men and women because they were both serfs. European population is going to double around the year 1200 because of the warmer temperatures that they have, and also because they're using some advancements like the three-field system, where they would allow one field. You can see in the image here, field number 3 is fallow, which means that they're allowing the land to rest so that it will increase the fertility of the soil. Now, what's going to happen is the population is really going to start to increase around the year 1200. It's even going to increase greater than the population of China during the same time period, because remember the reasons we talked about in class for why the Chinese were losing some of their population because of disease, because of the attacks of the Mongolians, and the flooding of the Yellow River, things like that. So the population in Europe is on the rise. But in the late 1300s and into the 1400s, Europe is going to get struck with the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death. This is going to cause a loss of up to 2/3 of the population in some parts of Europe. Other parts, 50% loss of life, a third loss of life. But this is going to be a lot of people that are dying in Europe because of this bubonic plague. We'll talk a little more about the details of it in class, how it happened exactly, what was going on with the bubonic plague and things like that. But for right now, make sure that you notice the decline in population is going to lead to the following things. Because the population is declining in Europe because of the bubonic plague, this is going to lead towards scarcity of a labor workforce. Towns began becoming freed from feudal obligations because there weren't very many people to fulfill the feudal obligations. There's going to be a decline in the influence of the church. A lot of people are going to view this as God condemning them and things like that. And so other people are going to lose faith in the church during this time period. And it's also going to cause a disruption in trade. Now, peasants that survive the bubonic plague are going to be able to demand higher wages. And most historians say that the bubonic plague actually brings an end to serfdom in Europe. So think about it this way. Do you remember how the people that were rowing the boats in ancient Greece, the trireme was the boat, and they started demanding more political representation because they knew that their role was an important one? The serfs that survived the bubonic plague are going to look to the lords that are leading them, and they're going to say, hey, everybody else died. I'm the only worker that exists here. So you need to pay me more. Hey, how's it going? Now, this is also, we're going to start to see the beginning of the industries with water mills, with iron making, and towns are going to begin to grow in Europe. And when towns grow, we're going to see pollution rising. We're also going to see deforestation taking place more and a demand for more coal. Let's talk about the revival of some of these European cities. Towards the end of the Middle Ages, we're going to see some economic revival happening in Europe. We're going to see an increase in trade happening. Remember, nobody really traded in Europe. Everything was just self-contained on the manor. But towards the end of the Middle Ages, we're going to see this revival of trade happening. Urbanization is going to go up. We're going to see different leagues like the Hanseatic League, spelled Hanseatic. And this is going to be an economic alliance that's going to be created in northern Germany. So we're going to see economic alliances. Venice is going to be a city that's going to be thriving. So is Florence, Italy. Genoa is another city in Italy. And Flanders, which is in present day the present day Netherlands, they're going to be a city that's going to thrive because of the textile industry. The cities are going to be cities are going to become places where people feel that they have more freedoms. There's more mobility. You think about being on a manor. You can't really rise up. If you're born a serf, you basically stay a serf your whole life. And so these people in the cities are going to view this as an opportunity for more mobility. They're going to kind of be able to move up in social status and things like that. Most European Jews during this time period lived in cities. Jewish people are going to be persecuted in a lot of European cities, with the exception of Rome. The Catholic Church is actually going to be seen as a protector of Jewish people. The Jewish people are going to be blamed for the Bubonic Plague. We know that this is not true. The Bubonic Plague was brought by the Mongolians. The fleas on the rats brought it. Many Jewish people are going to be expelled from places like Spain. They're told to leave, not welcomed. Going back to economics, guilds are going to be associated with this time period. Guilds are a group of artisans or merchants who are going to control the practice or the craft in the particular town. So all the leather workers would get together, or all the people that are creating different goods are going to work together. Thanks a lot. Women, it's going to be rare for women to be able to join these guilds. We're going to see a rise of some wealthy merchant families during this time period, like the Medicis. The Medici family is from Florence. This is one of the most powerful and wealthy families of the time period. We're going to see banks grow during this time period. Banks are going to start giving loans to people. We're going to see the creation of checks being created, investment, money changing, people exchanging one type of money for another. All of this stuff is starting to happen towards the end of the Middle Ages. Architecture is going to change greatly. This is the time period where we're going to see Gothic cathedrals, which is late medieval architecture. Key features, if you look at it, you see the pointed arches. You're going to see the flying buttresses. You're going to see the high towers, these spires. There's all of these, the beautiful large interiors. There's these big windows. But if you notice about this architecture, what direction does everything seem to be pointing? If you look closely, everything's pointing upwardly when you look at the Gothic cathedrals. And so that's intentional. The architects are intentionally building these structures so that your attention is pointed up towards heaven. That's where it's supposed to draw your attention, is to the heavens. The men who built these cathedrals really didn't have any formal training. There weren't any great universities at this time period. And so a lot of the building of these cathedrals is going to be by trial and error. They're going to build them, they're going to collapse, and they're going to say, well, we did that wrong. Let's try it again a different way. And so they're going to learn from their mistakes. During the Renaissance, we really start to see a revival as early as the 1200s. So Europe starts to go into the Dark Ages, or the Middle Ages, if you want to call that, around the year 500. By 1200, we kind of start to see a revival of learning. Now, it's really going to take off in the late 1300s and into the 1400s, kind of after they survive and get through the bubonic plague. But this Renaissance, it's literally called, or this is what Renaissance means, rebirth. And it started in northern Italy, and it's going to move up into the northern part of Europe. So it's going to start in northern Italy, and then it's going to move up into Germany, into France, into England, and places like that. Well, what do we see happening here? Creation of universities in Europe during this time period. Universities already existed in the Muslim world. Remember the madras? In Western Europe, they're going to kind of, I guess, take the university to the next level. The Muslims create these universities as a place for studying religion and things like that. What the Europeans do is they start granting degrees to people. And so you go to college, you go to the university, and you get your degree. We're going to see something called scholasticism during this time period. Scholasticism is a combination of combining the study of philosophy, which was very popular during the Greek time, combining that with the study of religion. And so Thomas Aquinas is going to be a master of this particular study. Hey, David, how's it going? Just making I'm just making a video for my students. Yeah. And so Thomas Aquinas is this kind of champion of scholasticism. All right, here's some other things that we need to note when we talk about some literary contributions. Yeah, you need to be familiar with Dante. Dante writes a book called The Divine Comedy, and this is it's where he follows the journey through the nine circles of hell and the seven terraces of purgatory and entrance into paradise. Chaucer is going to write Canterbury Tales, which the important thing about this is that it's one of the first stories written in the vernacular English, which the vernacular is common spoken language during the time period, not just what people read, but kind of how the language was spoken. You need to be familiar with humanists, and these humanists are people that are focusing on grammar, poetry, history, ethics, and really what the humanists are doing is they're celebrating the individual. And it's going to stimulate the study of the classic Greek and Roman literature. And humanism is supported by wealthy patrons. Thanks, David. Now, you need to be familiar with Erasmus, and Erasmus is Erasmus. Did I leave out Petrarch? Oh, Petrarch wrote a lot of sonnets, and he was a humanist scholar. So go back to the things I just said about humanists. Sorry, I went out of order there. And so that's Petrarch. He wrote sonnets and is a humanist scholar. Erasmus. Erasmus is known for the New Testament in Greek and correcting a lot of translation errors that there were. And in 1511, Erasmus is going to write a book called The Praise of Folly. And he actually gets into a little bit of trouble for doing this because he's kind of poking fun at the Catholic Church. Now, he himself was a devout Catholic, and but he kind of points out some of the flaws that he felt that the Catholic Church had in this book that he writes called The Praise of Folly. Sir Thomas More is known for writing a book called Utopia, and utopia means paradise, and so it's kind of his view of what perfect society would look like, and he wrote that in 1560. Gutenberg, very important individual. Gutenberg, he took the idea of wood block printing that we got from Asia, and he improved upon it. And so what he came up with was movable individual letters, and he came up with a new type of ink that was suitable for printing on paper. And so Gutenberg is going to come up with the printing press, and so that's his big claim to fame. And literally what it is it's a mechanical device that pressed ink type onto sheets of paper, and they're going to be able to do it over and over and over again, and so they're going to be able to mass produce documents. The Bible was the first book ever printed on the printing press in the year 1454. By 1500, 10 million copies of the Bible had been printed. What is this going to lead to? A rise in literacy. The more reading material that is available to people, the literacy rate is going to go up. So Gutenberg really helps improve Europe in that sense. All right, some Renaissance artists. You need to know Leonardo da Vinci. He's an Italian painter and sculptor, known most famously for the Mona Lisa, which is oil on canvas. He also painted The Last Supper, which is a fresco, which is paint on wet plaster. His notebook also had designs for airplanes, for submarines, for tanks. He was way ahead of his time. Make sure that you're familiar with a term called realism, which is focusing on art over religion. We're going to see the Europeans doing realism, which is where they're going to start to focus on art over religion. It's going to kind of take the place of it. Michelangelo is going to be known for the Sistine Chapel, which is on the right here, and also the statue of David. And you need to know that the Medici family is the biggest patron of the arts. All right, that is it. There's a couple things that I have left to share with you about chapter 16, so I'm not going to make another video. We'll cover it in class. Remind me to pick up by talking with you about monarchs and nobles during the Middle Ages. If it does snow, enjoy it, be safe, and maybe I'll see you at Riverview for some sledding. And I forgot to say, go Duke.